Let's go to the second model of integrated model of supervision. This is the one, Brian, that I created, the micro-counseling supervision model. This is probably the one that you're very familiar with because we used it a lot in class. Let's go to the basic tenet, though. The supervisees benefit from a standardized approach, so everyone in supervision is using the same kind of thing, whether you're in peer supervision or individual like today. And what I'm doing is we're helping you review the tapes, offering feedback for the tapes, evaluating, and then, of course, processing the skills.
Right.
Your role as a supervisor would be to use the counselor interview rating form. And I do have that here. I watched the entire tape, and I'll show it to you. I bet you're dying to get into that, Brian, I'm sure. But to use the counselor interview rating form as a mechanism for creating this reciprocal processing that we do together. And, of course, the main goal is to offer you constructive feedback. And then also, what the supervisor can do is to choose from these three main components. And here are the three main components of micro-counseling supervision. You're reviewing the skills with intention. You probably remember that a lot. Then we classify the skills. That's what I'm doing when I do the counselor interview rating form. And then we process those supervisory needs. And so what I'd like to do is to really focus again on your supervisory question. But I want to show you the counselor interview rating form. You got a big smile on your face. You haven't seen this in a few months, have you?
Yeah, it's been a while.
And I want to focus on that, Brian, because I want to do a couple things when we look at this form. First of all, I want you to look at the skills that are there. You're going to see, wow, I did a lot of skills. And then I want you to look at the skills you did not use. So the very first prong, there's a three-prong process, would be, first of all, to take a look at any of these skills, the micro and the macro skills, and I'll just let you take a quick look at them. Are there any of them, first of all, Brian, that you need to have clarified? My guess is you may not, but if you do, I'll talk to you about them.
No, I understand them.
Okay. So if you were a supervisor and the person says, well, gosh, you know, I don't know what a behavioral description is, then you would certainly clarify that, and then you can move on. The next stage would be to have us rate using this form. And what I would ask you to do is just take a quick look, and I don't know if you can read everything that I wrote, Brian, but let's take a look at the micro skills. You hit every single micro skill. I mean, it's amazing to me. There were two I circled that you did not. I did not see a perception check. In other words, to say to Sydney, you know, am I accurate? Am I on target here? I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I believe she knew you were on target because she kept saying, yeah, you know, when I come in here, you're always listening to me and you make me cry. You know, so I believe that, that she knew that, but I think that would be a skill that would be wise to use.
Absolutely.
I didn't see any clarification either. For example, when she talks about trust, you know, I think that's one of those words that we use globally, but her trust and your trust definition might be very different. So I'd like you to kind of zoom in on that. If we move down to problem-solving skills, look at this. This is where we're talking about you had a goal for the session. You were certainly trying to understand her concern. I thought you did a beautiful job of that. I mean, I had 5 different times that you were really trying to get into the depth of her concern. You were trying to evaluate her alternatives, but this is where I thought you fell short. I don't know if you knew that. Is that when you left, you didn't say, Sydney, you know, I want you to try to do this. And so that's where I thought probably on that area it was okay. I'd like you to work on there. Take a look at this one, though. When you were doing the action phase, Brian, she got you to do some self-disclosing about the flowers and giving flowers to your wife. I don't know if you remember that. But I think it would be really fun for you, and this is the answer to your supervisory question, I think. Immediacy. There were several times where I thought you could have done immediacy. And I wrote them down for you here. But if you can, give me your definition of immediacy. If you were using that intentional skill, what would that be?
For me, I think immediacy really means that when something presents itself in this session, to address it, to go right at it.
Exactly.
Not, I guess, trying to maybe postpone it, tie it back in later on. But this, if something is presented, they say something to kind of maybe stop the session, and you know, I noticed this. Can we maybe talk about this situation or whatever it was that was said? So, really being able to kind of maybe stop the flow of things and really kind of zero in on something that has happened or something that has been said.
Kind of here and now, what's happening right now. And I think that's going to help you in answering your supervisory question. How do I keep her focused? How do I keep her down in here? And here was one of the things I wrote down. Sydney says to you, it is easy to be honest with you, but it's really hard for me to be honest with other people. And you were silent. And so what I was suggesting, I wonder if this would be a great immediacy. Think about what could you say that would take her out of her story and bring her right back down into counseling. What do you think you might could say to her? She says, it's easy to be honest with you, but hard to be honest with others.
I might just basically examine, maybe having her give me a situation, tell me when it has been hard to be honest with other people. Can you think of a situation here recently where it's been difficult to be honest with someone? And
I think that'd be great, Brian, but how is it easy to do this with me? What's going on with us? That's the immediacy. What's happening here with us that will allow you to be trusting and honest with other people. So what are we doing in here? I think that will make a really big difference. So I want you to kind of think about that. We go to the rest of them. Closing and generalization, I thought you did a really concise job, Brian, because you summarized her content and feeling. You rescheduled. I loved your evaluation of the session, and I think this is also a supervisory answer to your question. You asked the question, what stood out in this session? And she told you, she said, I really appreciated this and I appreciated that. But I think you can even use process there too and say, here's what I liked about the session, Sydney. And again, focus and bring it down. Does that make any sense? Okay. So I thought you used all the skills really nicely. I'm going to give this to you later, Brian, so you can kind of look at the voids. But I want to focus just a little bit on some one-liners that you, I think, hit on, and then you could have expanded. And I think this will help you with answering your supervisory question. I think 3 different times in the tape, Sydney says, I'm a loser. Do you remember that? She says, I'm going to, when I pick mates or when I pick partners, I tend to choose the underdog. And then she said, and then I choose the loser. And I think if you could have taken those one-liners, the one that I keep hearing over and over in the tape, and just focus on them, I think you would have gotten her out of content, into her affect, and into process. Does that make any sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Again, I love the question that you asked her. What would you have your mom tell you to do now? I thought that was just a really example of getting out of content and moving into process. I thought that was a great one. And then I'm almost done here, Brian. It's so painful, I know. But do you remember at the very end of the tape, she says to you, I'm not a loser. So whatever you did worked. You have to know that your intentional skills did work. So I thought that was really one of the big strengths of the tape. So with that in mind, I've told you some of the things that I thought were strengths. Brian, tell me what you thought the strengths were.
Well, I too liked some of the things that I did. The silence, some of the paraphrasing. I definitely like those things. I think one of the interesting things, if we were to compare this this form to maybe one of my other sessions, I think we probably would see a lot of differences where, like some of the directives, some of the confrontation that really wasn't there in this session really would have been there in some other sessions. So, I think for me, being able to utilize some of that silence really is a way to kind of take in some of that story. Certainly it has helped me to kind of understand where she's coming from. I think there's one...
Sure, go ahead and take it if you want.
And I think the perception check, I think too, that I know that I did not use that often or at all, would have been helpful too, to again kind of maybe establish that trust and check in with her. Did I get that? Is that accurate?
Here.
Exactly. And it definitely, like we had said, the exploring and understanding concerns is something that certainly during the session I really felt that I was really consciously aware that I was trying to do that, very intentionally trying to be aware of what kind of issues, what kind of problems were going on. And I one of the other things too, the implementing alternatives, something that I'm usually right on top of.
You're so focused on that.
Usually
Isn't
looking
that
at
interesting?
and in this session I didn't do it. It didn't happen, and so that for me is I guess a little bit frustrating because I know that's an important part of the counseling process is to examine those alternatives and what does need to be different.
But Brian, I want to make sure you understand this though, but can you see that with different populations, I think you can get her to implement alternatives soon.
Absolutely.
But perhaps, I'm just wanting you to think, perhaps it was wise for you to take it slowly. The thing I knew though, that this is probably your 3rd tape with her.
I believe so, yeah.
And so I really want you to continue to do that. We can generalize, skills can generalize from population to population, but I think you do have to assess their developmental level, and you did with Sydney. So just be aware of that, and I think that's a great place to be. The only other thing I want to bring out, and then we'll move on to the next one, was towards the end of the tape, Brian, you did say to her about the issues of loss. There are so many things, Sydney, that you have lost. Relationships, her parents, and I think that would be another way to get her out of content and into process, by really focusing on those areas of loss.
Yeah.
And you did it. You really did it. I mean, your question was, well, Sydney, I mean, I think your statement was something about even a loss of a dream.
Yeah.
And I think you could have just expanded that and continued to work on that. Does that part make sense too?
Absolutely, yes it does.
So we could go on and on with this, Brian, but what part of micro-counseling supervision seems to be helpful for you?
The breakdown, how easily it breaks down each one of the skills. You know, it's there in black and white. It's and during the supervision process, it's really easy to see, you know, where, you know, just like we did, what skills are you strong at, and maybe what skills do you maybe need to kind of take a look at and start to develop a bit more. And it's straightforward. It's easy to use. It's easy to understand. So I really like that in the sense that, like I said, it really just kind of takes each one and goes through it, and then it offers that ability to kind of go back and talk about each one individually as you need to.
Well, and you know what I think is nice about this, Brian, is of course you and I are familiar with it too, so it probably doesn't help. Probably it's a little biased, but I think the other thing that micro-counseling supervision does is it provides us with a structure. If you think developmentally, it provides a foundation, a structure that almost anybody can use, depending on, doesn't matter your theoretic orientation. And then from there you could use these other pieces that you want to. But I think it's a nice foundation.
Absolutely.
And even for someone like yourself who's been counseling for many years, every once in a while it's nice to say, yeah, look what I forgot. I think that's going to be very helpful.
Right.